Alright, so in this video, I want to translate all of this C code to MIPS. And I'll start by translating this global array to MIPS. And because this is global, it has to be in the .data. The name of the array is global array. That's what I want to use, global array. And that's going to be a label. And because I don't know what the values are, I can use dot space. And here I provide the number of bytes, and that's going to be 40 because, you know, I have 10 ints, each int is 4 bytes. And then I do the dot text, and here I'm going to do main, and that's for the function. So let's first write this loop. So we start by assigning is0, which will be mapped to I, the value 0. So I'll do add immediate is0, 0, 0. Okay. So right now I have 0 in I, and then I want to say set less than immediate, and I can use t0 here, and I can use s0 here, and I can do 10. Okay. So the value of t0 will be 0 if this is false, which is s0 less than 10, and it'll be 1 if it's true. So if it's 0, if the value of t0 is 0, that means this condition is false, and that's when you want to quit the for. So I can say branch on equal, and if t0 is equal to 0, then I want to say after first loop. And here I'm going to do after first loop. Okay. So if s0 is less than 10, then there will be 1 here, and 1 is not equal to 0, and that means I'm going to go sequentially. Okay. And here, what I want to do is I want to assign the first element the value 1, and the second element the value 2. So I want to assign the element at index I, you know, the value I plus 1. Okay. So that's a store word, because I want to change the array. So I can just start by doing store word. Okay. And here I want to assign it I, so that could be s0. The problem with that is you don't want to assign it I, you want to assign it I plus 1. So maybe I can create another register, and let me give it the value t1. And that t1 is going to be s0 plus 1. So I'm going to add 1 to s0, and I'm going to assign it to t1. And that's going to be I plus 1 essentially. And I want to take this I plus 1, and I want to store it. I have this global array, which is the offset global array. And between those parentheses, I want to provide 0 first. But the next time I'd like it to have the value 4, so that I can go to global array 1, and then 8, then 12, 16, so on and so forth. So I cannot simply do s0, because s0 will be 0 the first time, but s0, which is I, will become 1 the next time. So I don't want 1 the next time, I want 4 the next time. So here is one way of doing it. I can use another register, which is t2, and I don't want to add immediate. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take the value of I, and I'd like to multiply it by 4, because that's really what I want, right? When I is 0, I'd like to have 0 here. When I is 1, I'd like to have 4 here. So maybe I can shift left logical, and I can shift s0, which is I, by 2. Right, so remember, when I shift to the left by two positions, essentially I'm multiplying this s0, which is I, by 4, and I'm assigning the value to t0, and right now I can use t0. And before I forget, of course, I have to increment I, so I have to say add immediate s0, s01. And also I have to jump to the beginning of the loop. So here, before the loop, I want to say first loop, and that's a label. And here I want to jump to first loop. Okay. So quickly let's review that. So if is0, which is I less than 10, that means there's going to be a 1 here. This condition is going to be false because this one is 1 and it's not equal to 0, so that means I'm going to go sequentially, and here I'm going to increment, or I'm going to add 1 to I and put it in T1, and then I'm going to multiply I by 4, and I'm going to use I plus 1 to store it in the global array, which is the first byte of my array, plus T2, which happens to be 0 because it's 0 multiplied by 4 the first time, and then I is going to be incremented by 1. I'm going to jump here, I'm going to check is 1 less than 10. The answer is true, so there's going to be a 1 here. This one is not equal to 0, so I'm not going to branch here. I'll get to here, I'm going to add 1 to I, put it in T1, and then I'm going to multiply 1 by 4, so I'm going to end up with 4, and I'm going to store 2, because that's, remember, this one is I plus 1, which is 2, so I'm going to store 2 in the first byte of my array, plus 4, which is the first byte of the second element of my array. So I'm storing 2 in my second element, and then 3 in my third element. So that's going to be the first loop. And before I do this one, I'd like to actually do this one so that I make sure that this loop kind of did what it's supposed to do. By printing the values, I'll make sure that I have from 1 to 10 in the first, after the first loop, and after that maybe we can get to that. Okay, so this loop will be similar to that one. I'm gonna reinitialize I to 0, so I'm gonna say add immediate is 0 0 0, and it'll be very similar, so I'll call it third loop. And right now set less than immediate, I can use T0, that's fine, is 0 and 10, and I can say, go like that, let me say branch on equal, and I can do T0 0, and I can say after third loop. Okay, now here what I'd like to do is I'd like to print the element at index I. Okay, so here I can do something similar to what I did here, which is multiplying I by 4. So let me copy that and I can paste it here. Let me make the font smaller. Edit. Let's try to do that really quickly. Editor, let me say 14. Okay. Alright, so I multiplied I by 4 and I put it in T2, and right now I want to load word, and I can load it to A0 because when I print the values, when I do syscall and I put 1 in V0, it'll actually print the value in A0, so I can directly put it in A0 right now, and I can use global array here, and between those parentheses I can specify kind of the offset, which is going to be I multiplied by 4, which is T2, so that's going to be T2. And because I'd like to print this one, I can say add immediate V0 0 1, and then I can do syscall. Okay, now I need to increment I, so I need to do that, so I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it. And of course I don't want to forget the jump, so I need to jump to third loop. So I'll post this code on aux and let me run it and see, the numbers from 1 to 10 hopefully. Let me assemble that. Oh, I need to save it. Okay, it's saved now. Let me assemble. Okay, so we have a problem here. After third loop. Okay, I don't have after third loop. So here's the problem. After first loop should be here, right? Because that's where my first loop ends. And I should have here after third loop. Let me try to assemble now. Okay, it doesn't like that. Maybe I misspelled this. Oh, I don't think I did misspell it, but of course I'm also forgetting the colon. I have to have the colon here. So let me assemble. It's working now. Let me hit play at once. And you can see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'd like to have spaces between those numbers. And I can do that by printing the character space. Now for me to print the character space, I have to know the ASCII code of a space, and I know the ASCII code of a space is 32, so I can say add immediate, and I can put in A0 the ASCII code of the space, which is 32, and of course I have to change V0 to 11, and then I can do syscall. Alright, so let me assemble and let me hit play, and we can see that we have the numbers from 1 to 10 with spaces between them. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So right now I have to do the second loop, which contains most of my code, and I need to do that after the first loop, and that's going to be here. And let me do second loop like that. And this loop will also go from 0 to 10. So let me assign the value 0 to I. So I'll do the same thing, add immediate S0, 0, 0. And let me do set less than immediate T0, S0, 10. And let me do branch on equal T0, 0. And I can do after second loop. And before I forget, I want to do after second loop here. Okay. And also, I want to jump before I forget to second loop. Alright, so the first thing that I do is I generate a random number between 0 and 9. And I can do that by putting the value 42 in V0. So I can first I need to specify the upper bound, and I can specify the upper bound before the loop here. I can say add immediate A1 0, and that's going to be 10. That's the upper bound. And one thing that I noticed here is that here I'm initializing I to 0 inside my loop. Obviously that's wrong, because my loop will never end if that happens. I have to have it outside the loop. Just like I have it outside the loop here, and just like I have it outside the loop here. Okay. Alright, so I have my random number, not yet. So let me actually put, I have the upper bound here. Let me put 42 in V0, add immediate V0, 0, and I have 42. And right now I do syscall. And when I do syscall, the random value will be stored in A0. Okay. So I have the random value stored in A0, and I'd like to get the element at index I and store it in a temp. So let me do that. So that's a load word, and let's say I'll use let me use T3, and then I want to use global array. And here between those parentheses, I don't want to use S0 because that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. I'd like to use S0 multiplied by 4, so I can copy this code again. So here I'm going to use T2, for the offset in byte. So in bytes, so that's going to be the index I. I'm going to shift it to the left by 2 positions. I end up with I multiplied by 4, and then I can use that T2 here, and the result will be stored in T3, and that's going to be the temp. And right now I'd like to store at that same location this value, which is really the element at the random index. So to do that, I need to first load word this one. So I need to bring the value at the random index, but the random index that we're generating, which is stored in A0, is going from 0 to 9, and I'd like to multiply that by 4. So let me use T4 for that. So let me shift left logical T4, and here we can have A0, which is going to contain the random value, and I shift it by 2, so I end up with, you know, how many bytes I want to jump by. And right now I can load word, I can get that value, and I can put it in T5, and I can say global array, and the shift that I will apply is going to be T4. So now I have the value of this element, and right now I'd like to put it here. Okay, so this one essentially, you know, is the array with index I, so I can store word right now, and I can say I want to store T5, which is what I loaded, and I want to use global array, and here I want to use T2, which is I multiplied by 4, so that's going to be T2 here. So I'm done with this line, and right now I want to store word the value that I have in temp, which I stored in where did I store that? I stored it in T3. Alright, so I should have actually added some comments here. So temp is stored in T3. So right now I need to store word T3, and I need to do global array, and right now I want to use the random index after multiplying it by 4, and I did that here because A0 contains a random index, and I multiplied by 4 and I stored it in T4, so I can do T4 here. And then of course I need to increment I by 1, add immediate S0, S01. Okay, so let's look at this loop again, and then we'll run it. So we know this part, that's kind of the same part for all of the 3 loops, and this one is going to generate a random number from 0 to this upper bound, which is stored in A1, so it's going to be a random number between 0 and 9, and then I'm taking I and I'm multiplying it by 4, and I'm storing it in T2, and right now I'm loading this one, which is essentially I multiplied by 4, and I'm storing it in T3. So temp is used here, you know, I'm using T3 for temp, and I'm storing the first element in the first iteration. The second iteration I'm going to have the second element, and then getting the value that syscall provided me with, and A0 is going to be the random value between 0 and 9. I'm multiplying it by 4 and storing that in T4, and right now I want to get the element using that random index, so I need to load word, that's the beginning of my array, and I'm using T4 here, and I'm storing the result in T5, and then I need to store T5 here, because that's what this does. That's going to get the value at this element, and it'll store it at this element. So this line kind of fetches the value at this index, so it'll bring me that value, and right now this store word, it'll actually do this part. Okay, so I'm gonna get the value, I'm gonna use the value that I fetched from the RAM, and I'm gonna store it in the array, and I'm going to use T2, which is I multiplied by 4. Okay, so that's what it is. And right now I want to use temp, which I stored in T3 right here. I'm using that to write back to the array at the index, the random index. So again, the random index was stored in A0, but then I multiplied A0 by 4, and I have the result in T4, so that's the offset that I'm using here, and that's going to change my array. and then I increment I jump, and at some point I'm gonna jump to after second loop, and I get to here and I print the array. So that's a lot of code, but it's recorded, so maybe you should watch the video multiple times. I'll post the code on aux. Let me run it, make sure it works. Let me assemble. Okay, it assembled fine. Let me run it, and here you can see that I have the random values shuffled.